Thank you, Hannah. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And if you don't mind, I'll get started on this right away. So Hannah doesn't give me the stop sign because I have a lot of information to cover. And other than some presentations that you've been in, I'm going to read most of this because it's kind of detailed and I don't want to miss any information that I have. So it all began in 1894. Placer miners had extracted every bit of gold from the bottom of Idaho's Clearwater River. Governor William J. McConnell, who lived here in Moscow, hoped the state's next valuable commodity could be the abundant supply of high-quality western white pine growing around the Clearwater River. McConnell invited 3 men to assess Idaho's potential for striking it rich in what he called green gold. The dense stands of white pine amazed blogger Theodore Fohl and timber speculators Charles O. Brown and his son Nathaniel. But the hopeful entrepreneurs didn't possess the finances necessary to develop such a big undertaking. Brown knew that timber barons Edward Schofield and Frederick Weyerhaeuser were rapidly depleting Minnesota's supply of the eastern white pine their businesses depended on. Brown encouraged the men to invest in Idaho's bountiful forests. Schofield sent his son George to scout the Clearwater forests. George's enthusiastic report caused Schofield to immediately send cruisers and surveyors to establish boundaries around what he wanted, the best stands. Weyerhaeuser's syndicate of 15 companies controlled everything timber and lumber related along the northern Mississippi River. James J. Hill, director of the Northern Pacific Railroad, had a federal land grant to construct a rail extension in Washington state, but the project never materialized. In 1891, Weyerhaeuser had tried to purchase Hill's 40 million acres of prime old-growth timber, but his syndicate refused to meet Hill's asking price. Weyerhaeuser was forced to look elsewhere for the resources he wanted to expand his empire. Schofield's report on Idaho's green gold was music to Weyerhaeuser's ears. His syndicate purchased large swaths of the Clearwater's timberland. By 1900, Weyerhaeuser and John A. Humbird, who had organized the Clearwater Timber Company, I misread that, had organized the Clearwater Timber Company. The next year, timber speculator William M. Deary and Henry C. Turish of Wisconsin Log and Lumber purchased land in the Clearwater, Potlatch, and Palouse River drainages for the Weyerhaeuser Syndicate and formed the Northland Pine Company in Moscow. Then Turish and the syndicate merged their holdings. In March 1903, Northland Pine and all its assets were incorporated as a Potlatch Lumber Company. The syndicate provided $3 million to construct a mill that would be the largest in the world operated by steam. The Weyerhaeusers and their syndicate now own most of the Clearwater country's private timberland, but they've made no effort to organize or provide resources to suppress fire on these lands, perhaps because it hadn't been an issue to protect their combustible timber resources in Michigan and Minnesota's rainier climate. In the summer of 1902, Theodore Fohl managed Clearwater Company's timberlands. He ran a small cruiser and development camp down the east slope of twin-humped Thunder Mountain. The summer was unusually hot and dry. Fohl took it on himself to protect the company's trees from going up in smoke. His crew hammered an improvised ladder onto a trunk of a hemlock snag that stood on top of Thunder Mountain and built a platform in its branches 15 feet off the ground. The story's told that every day Fohl had Mabel Gray, the Clearwater's camp cook and America's first lookout, hitch up her pony after she fed the crew breakfast and cleaned up, and again after dinner, ride 1/8 of a mile up Thunder Mountain, climb the snag, sit on the platform, and look out. This photograph dated 1902 shows 2 men helping Mabel Gray climb onto Fohl's lookout tree. Mabel's wearing a long sleeve blouse and a calf-length skirt that looks split for riding. Her footwear looks like riding boots and a broad brimmed hat maybe hanging around her neck. The story tells that if Mabel spotted smoke from a fire, she sounded a whistle to alert the crew, then rode her pony we see in the background in the picture, give them a location of the danger. I'd like to look at the story a little more closely. Mabel likely rose at first light to prepare a hearty breakfast for the crew. She split kindling and started a cook fire. She walked down to the spring house by the stream, portioned off bacon from a slab hanging inside, and spooned up some sourdough starter. Then she gathered eggs from the chicken coop. Back at camp, Mabel built up the cook fire, put on coffee, mixed and kneaded her bread dough, and set it in a warm spot to rise. She cut thick slices of bread she'd baked the night before, spread on jam she'd made from last summer's huckleberries. Then she cooked breakfast. The crew ate and headed out. Mabel washed and dried the plates and cups, stacked them in a cupboard, and hung the towels to dry. She walked back to the spring house to gather oxtails, potatoes, and beans, and carrots and tomatoes she had harvested from her garden. Back at the cook tent, Mabel filled a cast iron kettle with water she carried from the stream. She hung the kettle over the fire and added the meat and vegetables to stew. She restoked the fire, put bread dough in the Dutch oven, and laid it in the coals to bake. The photo shows us that next, Mabel changed into her riding gear, hitched her pony, rode up Thunder Mountain with 2 crewmen, pulled off their jobs. The men helped Mabel climb onto the lookout tree where she sat and looked out until they returned to help her down. Back at camp, Mabel changed into her cooking clothes, set the table, served the stew. She cleaned up, changed back into her riding gear, rode back to the lookout crew with 2 crewmen, climbed the tree, and sat and looked out again until the men arrived to help her down. Back at camp, she unhitched her pony and relaxed with the crew. She might have smoked a pipe and sipped a glass of whiskey before she went to bed, just so she could rest to do it all again the next day. Really? Theodore Fohl likely managed his crew as capably as he managed the Weyerhaeuser's timber assets. I think if Fohl sent Mabel to the lookout tree twice a day, it was only for a good reason. Mabel Gray was, beyond a doubt, a strong, self-confident woman. I think she agreed to sit in that tree for hours, only when the probability of fire existed, mostly after a lightning storm. I think she agreed to be America's first lookout because Fohl made it clear that her work was important and appreciated. And I think Fohl sent 2 crewmen to help Mabel safely climb the tree because he knew that good lookouts, like good cooks, were hard to find. Later that summer, on September 8, 1902, wildfires ignited on the Oregon side of the Columbia River Gorge. Embers blown across the river ignited nearly a dozen fires in Washington's southwestern foothills. Winds converged the fires into a tornadic blaze that raged unchecked for 5 days and consumed more than 238,000 acres in Washington's Mount Rainier Forest Reserve. The fire reached the town of Yacolt, blistered the paint on its buildings, and then burned itself out. At least 65 people in Washington and Oregon died in the Yacolt Burn. In response, Congress only doubled the General Land Office's firefighting budget to a mere $4,072. In July 1905, records tell that Fohl rounded up 16 men in Orofino to fight the lightning-caused Harlan fire that raged through Weyerhaeuser's forest near Pierce City. The fire destroyed the homestead of fur trapper Harlan, The fire destroyed the homestead of fur trapper John Paxson Harlan and about 80 acres of timber. Perhaps Mabel had spotted the smoke from her lookout tree. That August, the area's timber companies formed the Clearwater Potlatch Timber Protective Association. They funded a fire protection force to work on whatever property where fires occurred. Theodore Fohl, likely a strong advocate of this effort, was appointed their chief fire warden. 1906 was Mabel Gray's last fire season as lookout on Thunder Mountain. No records exist that she ever spotted a smoke, but she and Fohl must have found purpose and value in her efforts for her to have climbed that lookout tree for 4 fire seasons. That summer, the Clearwater Timber Protective Association built a crude 14-foot tall open platform about 100 feet south of Mabel's original lookout. A full-time lookout staffed this platform on the mountain renamed Bertha Hill. Bertha Hill's current tower, built in 1958, stands on our nation's longest operating fire lookout site. Back in 1901, the House defeated President Theodore Roosevelt's proposed bill to transfer America's burgeoning forest reserves from the U.S. Department of the Interior's General Land Office to the Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Forestry under Gifford Pinchot, a committed conservationist. The Land Office had never developed an organized system to fight wildfires. It took Congress until July 1st, 1905, to finally approve the transfer of 63 million acres of forest reserves to the Department of Agriculture. Chief Forester Gifford Pinchot renamed his organization the United States Forest Service. Over the next 2 years, Roosevelt designated 141 million more acres as forest reserves. The Fulton Amendment, scheduled for ratification on March 7th, 1907, would cede to Congress rather than the President the sole power to create additional forest reserves in the new states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. The bill would also change the name of forest reserves to national forests to emphasize that the forests were to be used and not preserved. To skirt the upcoming pending limitations, Roosevelt and Pinchot blue penciled the boundaries of new forest reserves onto maps. Roosevelt signed a proclamation for each edition under the Presidential Powers in the Forest Reserve Act of 1891. In 2 days, Pinchot and Roosevelt established 17 new or combined forest reserves containing over 6 million acres inside the 6 soon-to-be closed-off western states. The press dubbed the newly protected forests as the Midnight Reserves. Pinchot organized the national forest into 6 autonomous regional districts. He promoted William Buckout Greeley to supervise District 1, headquartered in Missoula, Montana. District 1 spanned 41 million acres, comprised of 22 national forests across northeastern Washington, northern Idaho, Montana, southwestern North Dakota, and northwestern South Dakota. Greeley had discovered a like-minded timber protectionist in George S. Long, general manager of the Weyerhaeuser Timber Company in Tacoma, Washington. Long had organized the West Washington Forest Fire Protection Association following the company's extensive losses in the Yacolt Burn. The 2 men joined with lumbermen in Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, and California and formed the Western Forestry and Conservation Association. In January 1909, Greeley negotiated agreements with the private forest protection associations throughout District 1, but Pinchot viewed the lumbermen as profiteers, and he disapproved Greeley's proposed alliances. Roosevelt had declined to run for the presidency again. William Howard Taft, elected in 1908, was not a committed conservationist. He forced Pinchot to resign on January 7th, 1910. Henry Graves, District of Forestry at Yale University, became the head of the Forest Service. Graves maintained that one man or a corps of men should be responsible for detecting fires early so they could be promptly attacked. He permitted Greeley to institute his program of cooperative private-public firefighting. District 1 signed agreements with 4 timber protective associations in northern Idaho, plus 3 lumber companies in western Montana. Greeley had acquired an organization poorly schooled in large-scale firefighting because good weather had reigned over the northwestern portion of District 1 for half a decade. But in the summer of 1910, little rain fell in Montana's Lolo and Idaho's Coeur d'Alene forests. Forest floors in District 1 crackled underfoot with explosive timber from the drawn-out drought. Frequent fires broke out next to construction zones along the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul rail lines. Bone-dry winds blew like bellows and incited sparks into explosive blazes. Greeley's timber protection allies influenced the Secretary of Agriculture to permit him to exceed his budget to bolster District 1's undersupplied defenses. Greeley hired 300 temporary firefighters from local employment offices and trained his rangers how to fight the fires with crews of up to 50 men. In his book, Fire Lookouts of the Northwest, Ray Crespitt corroborates that Greeley had I'm going to start this over because it's important, excuse me. In his book, Fire Lookouts of the Northwest, Ray Crespitt corroborates that Greeley had emulated Theodore Fohl's lookout beginning in 1907 and until the 1910 fires. Greeley had 12 operating lookouts in District 1, 3 in Idaho, 7 in Montana, and 2 in Northeast Washington. Following the Great Fires of 1910, District 1 had built 34 new lookouts by 1915, and the area's timber protective associations had built 17. In 1912, the Klamath National Forest built a log cabin equipped with a telephone on top of Klamath Peak. On June 1st, 1913, Supervisor McCarthy hired Hallie Morse Daggett as a forest guard at Eddy's Gulch Lookout Station, a hard 3-hour climb with pack animals. Daggett is recognized as the first woman to serve as a U.S. Department of Agriculture fire lookout. Hallie had learned to ride, hunt, fish, and shoot growing up in the rugged Siskiyou Mountains. McCarthy later wrote that the 2 candidates who'd applied before Daggett were pathetic. And although Daggett was no gentleman, he hired her because she had all the requisites of a first-class lookout. Daggett worked at Eddy's Gulch Lookout for 14 years. William Greeley became chief of the United States Forest Service in 1920. He created national forests east of the Mississippi River and continued to cooperate with private, state, and other federal agencies. And the Forest Service built staffed lookouts in every state at the time except Kansas. The greatest concentration, as we know, of lookouts was constructed to protect the North Idaho and Western Montana forests ravaged by the Big Burn of August 21, 1910. Today, lookout towers in national forests are staffed full-time. Today, lookout towers in national forests that are staffed full-time are nearly extinct. Their survival depends, as it has since 1902, on whether lookouts are pertinent tools alongside today's high-tech fire protection systems. In papers presented at future lookout seminars, remember not only the names of America's first lookouts, but also the names of the last. Thank you.